capitalization slipped by nearly ₦1 trillion. Dangote Petroleum Refinery has taken a major step towards what could become Africa's biggest ever stock market listing. Samsung posts a record quarterly profit as booming demand for AI chips offset a first ever loss in its mobile business. Oil prices swing sharply on renewed Middle East fighting as ExxonMobil declares force majeure on a key Nigerian oil field. And Nigeria's budget deficit widens sharply, pushing government debt past its own safety threshold. I am Louisa Asidi. Stay with us. Back. We begin this morning with a warning Nigerian manufacturers have been sounding for years as it landed with fresh urgency this week. At the 17th National Council on Industry, Trade and Investment in Enugu, the National Sugar Development Council's Executive Secretary and CEO, Kama Barkim, painted a stark picture of an economy at risk of pricing itself out of opportunity, even as the African Continental Free Trade Area opens access to a market of more than 1.4 billion consumers across the continent. His message was simple. Nigeria does not lack demand for its goods, but it's becoming too expensive to produce competitively at home, from electricity and logistics to financing and other input costs. Manufacturers are paying far more than their rivals in countries like Vietnam and China. And the result is a sector struggling to grow, expand exports, and hold its own in both domestic and regional markets. However, the bigger question now is whether Nigeria can use the African Continental Free Trade Area as a launchpad for industrial growth, or whether high production costs will continue to push investments, jobs, and market share elsewhere. To unpack that, I'm joined by David Akau, financial analyst and lecturer. Mr. David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
It's so lovely to have you here once again with us.
Here.
Okay. From your own perspective, what do you think is the biggest message and the current warning that Nigerian manufacturers may lose both domestic and regional markets because of high production costs?
It's a very big issue right now because we are no longer competitive, not in Nigeria, not in Africa. And that's bad, that's sad, because where imported goods becomes cheaper than locally made goods, then where are we going?
Oh, that's quite sad on the side of Nigeria.
Sad.
When you have imported goods becoming cheaper
than locally made
goods. It's actually quite sad.
Yeah.
Now, how serious is the competitive gap between Nigeria and countries like Vietnam and China when it comes to the cost of producing goods?
It's actually a serious issue. I might not have the numbers at heart now,
okay,
but I know that Nigeria pays so much when it comes to production. Take, for example, electricity. Nigeria pays so much. It runs into trillion just to produce. So if electricity alone is that high, then what are other running costs? And then how can you sell such products cheap enough for it to be, competitive in the market? That's the problem we are facing. Vietnam is doing better. China is doing better. But we are just, I think we should look into it. Seriously, the government should look into it, how we can bring down cost of production to the barest minimum.
Okay, now looking at what you're talking about, the electricity cost and everything, when you look at power costs, diesel dependency, and also unreliable electricity, how do they affect the average manufacturer in Nigeria?
Yes, the manufacturing companies, because we do not have enough, we do not have adequate electricity supply in Nigeria.
Okay.
So they have to look for alternative. What they also spend on alternative power source is quite very, very high. I mean, the cost of diesel is increasing on a daily basis. Okay. But that's what it is. It's fluctuating. And it's fluctuating higher than lower.
Okay.
So what do we do? And these people, you need these things to produce. It's even very difficult, very expensive, highly expensive, and in some cases not even possible to use solar. So
Yes.
they either use NEPA, that's BDEC, electricity supply from the grid,
On the
or
grid, yes.
they use
An
diesel.
alternative
Yes.
Electricity supply,
Supply,
diesel,
yes,
fuel, or
yes,
maybe like solar.
Yes.
So now, looking at the Nigerian's manufacturing sector, do you think the challenge is really about production cost, or do you think it's about something much bigger, like the broader structural issues in the economy?
I think it's more like production cost.
Okay.
That's the foundation, because when you want to become competitive, what you need to do first is to cut corners, and that will reduce the quality of that product. So you say that you're trying to do is to be competitive. So I think production cost is a major factor to so many things.
So the cost of production is more of a bigger issue than the broader structural issues in the Nigerian economy?
No. You see, these things they have chain reactions.
Okay.
So when you say cost of production, it's just one aspect.
Okay.
We have so many other issues that are bedeviling our economy. But then we are focusing on the cost of production for today. If not, we have so many other issues. But cost of production is among the if you put it into percentages, it's among the highest.
So it is among the highest.
Yes.
It's the majority issue
Yes.
that you have in the manufacturing sector.
Yes.
Okay. The African Continental Free Trade Area gives Nigeria businesses access to huge African markets.
True.
So why is it that Nigeria is still struggling to benefit from that opportunity?
Because we are not competitive, despite the fact that we have about 1.4 trillion, I think, billion access to consumers. But still, when we are not competitive, we are not competitive, because nobody will go for a product, same quality, and we want to go for a higher cost. No. And when your production cost is higher, you sell higher. You can't sell lower because you make a loss.
Okay.
That's just our problem. And then for people that want to be competitive, they cut corners. When it gets into the market, it is not competitive also because the quality drops.
The quality drops.
Yes.
So either way, there's a loss.
There's a loss.
Cut corners, you lose because of your quality
Yes.
of the thing to do. And if you want to do the right thing, you have to think about the high production cost of everything.
That is it. Even in Nigeria alone, we have about 230 million consumers. Wow. That alone is even enough for us to, leverage on. But the problem is that when it's too expensive, it's too expensive. And that's what it is.
Okay. Now, do you think Nigerian manufacturers are currently positioned to compete under the African Continental Free Trade Area, or are they already at a disadvantage?
Yes, they're actually disadvantaged, because as I always say, we have the technical know-how, we have the raw materials to an extent, but the truth of the matter is that when the cost of production becomes so high, you can't sell below what you produce. And so it's already a disadvantage for us. Let's remove other aspects, other, economic structural aspects. Let's just focus on this production cost. If something can be done, then we will become more competitive. And actually, when we become more competitive, we will start, there'll be more money. And as the Bible says, money answered all things.
Yes.
So we start solving some other aspects. Our GDP will increase.
Yes.
And some other things will start working for us.
So what you're basically saying is that if the manufacturing sector is being worked on, so many good things will happen to Nigeria.
Yes.
That's
a lot of manufacturing companies are actually struggling.
Okay.
Some of them are already out of markets.
because of what is happening right now.
Definitely.
Okay. Now, in the cost of, or rather, what role do you think high borrowing costs and expensive working capital play in weakening the industrial growth and expansion?
Okay, we take it. Working capital is one.
Okay.
Cost of borrowing is another. Now, when you borrow and you need to pay so much, that's already a disadvantage, because that means that your finance cost is very high. Then your running cost, or what's called the working capital, is also very high. What happens? That means that it's like, being in the middle of the devil and the Red Sea.
Yes.
You don't know what to do. You go this way, it hits you back. You go this way, it hits you back. And don't forget also that will not stop the tax authorities to also come after you. You see, so from every corner, it looks as if we do not have respite. That's what it is. And if we must be competitive, these things has to be handled somehow. Policies have to be, initiated that will help us.
Okay, so you're basically saying that the government should try to help the manufacturing sector.
Definitely.
So that it's not like you're standing in between a valley and you have nowhere to come out from.
That's true.
Okay, now looking at the cost of doing a business, small, big, medium, how does poor logistics affect it? And why does that matter for competitiveness?
Okay. The answer is simple. Let's take movement of your produce from one point to another, and you can't take those items to where the market is. What do you think will happen?
They'll spoil?
That is when they are perishable. But even when they are not, the person on the other end, because it is difficult, it will take you a higher cost to transfer to that point. And what happens? It becomes more expensive because it adds to your running cost, and the person on the other end will not be willing to buy a product of the same quality that he can get a lesser cost.
A lesser cost. So it's quite unfortunate
Very,
for
very.
all these things that are happening. Now, some people argue that Nigeria has a demand problem. Now, while others say it is mainly a production problem, what exactly is your stand in this matter?
You see, just as I said, 230 million, if you give them a quality product at a lesser price, they will go after it. We still have a dumping issue where we want to be associated with foreign goods. In fact, I see this toothpick, that we also import into the country.
Yes.
And it's like, But the truth of the matter is that when you have a competitive good that is similar to what they are bringing, people will eventually, gradually shift from the foreign-based goods to the locally made ones. And of course, you know that we have the people that are below the poverty line.
Yes.
A lot of them in the country. So if they see cheap things, they will go for it.
So if they see cheap things, they would go for it because that is effectively better for them. They are not having a lot of means to spend so much money.
True.
Yes. So what happens to jobs, investment, and capacity utilization when manufacturers continue to face rising operational costs?
Yeah, they lay people off because one of the highest costs in any manufacturing company is the personnel cost. And so when you can no longer afford it, what do? You lay people off. You use lesser people to do more jobs. Those lesser people cannot give in their best. They produce lesser quality of goods and services, and it just keeps happening. And the end is the resultant effect is going elsewhere to look for something else that is better. Then again, human development will also be affected because we have a lot of redundant people who tends to get frustrated. Their mental health issues will increase. And you see a lot of people that are wearing good clothes, but they are not normal.
I would say that's the new normal in Nigeria.
Yes, that's what it is.
Okay, now looking at policy measures,
Yes.
what urgent measure would make the biggest difference in helping Nigerian manufacturers compete better at home and also across Africa?
Assist the manufacturing companies
Okay.
to reduce costs by placing policies that will assist, that will help them. Give them low one-digit interest loans that will make them comfortably be able to pay. Secondly, open the room for harnessing locally sourced raw materials. Because one of our problems also is that we go abroad, get raw materials, dollar is very high, and so by the time it gets into Nigeria, the cost of it becomes too high, and we cannot sell below the price of what we have produced. Then also, let us see how the purchasing power of the Nigerian currency can be increased. For goodness me, if somebody earns 10,000 naira and is able to buy one bag of rice, it's not the same thing like somebody earning 250,000 naira and they can only be able to buy one bag of rice and maybe some oil or something. So you see the problem. So they need to look at these policies. The value of naira must increase. It favors the citizenry more than it favors others.
Or it favors others.
Others, yes.
Okay, now beyond government action, what do you think manufacturers should be doing to improve efficiency and also to stay competitive in the market, both in Nigeria and also beyond Nigeria?
All right. First of all, the manufacturers should try as much as possible to use locally made goods, locally made raw materials.
Okay.
And don't sell to Nigerians alone. It's funny to say this because Nigerians won't be able to, because of the exchange rate issues. So if you, as a manufacturer, must bring in raw materials, why not look for something to produce, to sell, so that you can have exchange, foreign exchange to your favor that you can use to buy those items that you are importing. That is where we don't have them in Nigeria. So sell to Nigerians, divide your products into two, sell also to foreigners, produce quality items, sell to foreigners. It will help you because you have a higher, you have a hard currency that will help you. And you can now be able to use that to purchase instead of changing so much naira to small dollars.
So Nigerians should locally get raw materials, produce, sell to foreigners. In that way, you get a higher yield.
Yes.
Because, with the naira and the dollar, you get a higher yield, and that would also be positive for your business. That's actually a really good point. Now, looking ahead, do you think Nigeria can still turn the African Continental Free Trade Area into an industrial advantage? Or do you think the country is at a risk of missing this opportunity?
If this country continues like this, we are actually at a risk.
Why so?
Firstly, the cost of production is high. Secondly, it is also high because security is a problem. So take, for example, before now, you can just walk into your farm, produce and sell, and it's cheap. But sometimes you need to gather some few boys to go with you so that you have security. Then you pay them, which eventually makes the cost of production higher. Then most people have decided that, okay, instead of me to pay big ransom, let me just stay at home. So the raw material becomes more expensive.
Okay. Do you have anything else you would want to say that you think would be an advantage to the manufacturing sector in Nigeria?
Okay. First of all, the manufacturers should do all they can as I said before, to use locally made raw materials. We have them. They should use them. Secondly, they should be, be able to harness if they cannot get the technology here, they should buy the technology so that we produce things that are competitive in the world market, not just Africa. Thirdly, they should be able to have a body that can talk to the government to somehow, posit policies that will help us, that will help the manufacturing companies to do better. If all these are put in place, and again, security, they are all put in place, very soon, the manufacturing companies in Nigeria will be number one. As I've always said, I believe in Nigeria, I believe in the people. We are doing well already.
Okay, so if all these things are put in place, the
Yes.
Nigerian manufacturing sector could have a very advantage both in Nigeria and also beyond the
Nigeria,
galaxy.
all over.
Okay. Thank you so much
Thank
for that. It was lovely hearing from you about the manufacturing sector in Nigeria. So it's time now for a short break. When we return, more Business Buzz. Welcome back. Let's look at the markets where the Nigerian equities had a rough day. The all share index shed 1,601.26, down 0.65%, to close as 245,378.91, 58.35 trillion naira. May and Baker led the gainers, jumping 9.87% to 42 naira 85 kobo, followed by Legend Internet and DAAR Communications. However, on the losing side, Triple G pays decliners, down 10% to 2 naira 88 kobo. Now on to the global energy markets, where oil prices are swinging sharply this week. Brent crude surged past $90 a barrel on Wednesday after the United States and Saudi Arabia struck Iran-backed groups in Iraq, before easing slightly on Thursday to around $89 as tankers kept moving through the Red Sea Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Traffic through the Strait of Hormuz remains well below normal, and analysts warn that any disruption to Saudi export infrastructure could send prices sharply higher again. For Nigeria, an oil exporting nation, higher prices offer a short-term revenue boost, but only if production can keep pace. Staying with energy, in Nigeria, where production question has just become more urgent, ExxonMobil's local affiliate has declared force majeure on crude exports from its Erha deepwater field after equipment damage to its floating export terminal, putting around 200,000 barrels a day at risk. The outrage threatens to undercut Nigeria's recent gains in output the government is counting on to boost oil revenue and support this year's budget. However, the company says it cannot yet say how long repairs will take. We'll go on a short break. When we come back, more Business Buzz.
The Delta State government invites business leaders, global investors, policymakers, and industry captains to the Delta State Economic and Investment Summit 2026, themed Harnessing Our Strengths and Unlocking Our Potentials. Chief guest of honor, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON. Keynote speaker, Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, GCON. Guest speaker, renowned scholar, Professor Patrick Lumumba. Chairman of the occasion, Engineer Austin Avuru. Other distinguished local and international participants will also be in attendance. Date, August 3 to 5, 2026. Time, 10 a.m. daily. Venue, Dome Event Center, Asaba. Chief host, His Excellency, Right Honorable Sheriff Obrewori, Governor, Delta State. Announcer, Dr. Kingsley Emu, Secretary to Delta State Government and Chairman Planning Committee.
Hello, my name is Sheriff Obrewori, the Governor of Delta State. I have the pleasure to invite you to Delta State Economic and Investment Summit 2026, taking place in Asaba from August 3rd to 5th, 2026. Over 40 prospective investors from Brazil and China, policymakers, business leaders, and international development partners are expected at this summit. It is an opportunity to connect your business ideas with capital, foster strategic partnerships, and take your business to a new level of growth and expansion. This government believes strongly in the economic development model that is led by the private sector. Hence, we have put in place investor-friendly policies that encourage private investors, support business growth, and foster massive industrialization of our state. With Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, GCON, as keynote speaker, and Professor Patrick Lumumba as guest speaker, the summit promises to be an exciting and rewarding time for all participants. So, join us and be part of shaping the next chapter of Delta State.
Welcome back. Elsewhere in Nigeria's energy sector, gas distributor Excella says it has connected a wave of new industrial customers, deepening domestic gas supply. The company's gas-linked subsidiary has extended its network to manufacturing, hospitality, and pharmaceutical businesses, including several major hotel chains. Excella says the expansion supports the federal government's drive to grow domestic gas use and cutting businesses' reliance on costlier imported fuel. Also, the state government has secured a $150 million loan from the Islamic Development Bank, topped up with a $10 million state contribution to build a 100-megawatt solar plant in Makukeli. It forms part of a broader continental push, the World Bank and African Development Bank's Mission 300 initiative, which has already connected more than 50 million Africans to electricity. State governments across Nigeria are increasingly turning to renewable financing as the national grid struggles to continue with reliability. Turning to the market, Dangote Petroleum Refinery has formally filed with Nigeria's Security and Exchange Commission to begin its long-awaited stock market listing. The commission says it expects no regulatory delays, with the refinery still targeting a September launch in what's expected to become the largest listing in African stock market history. It comes just days after the refinery's $2.5 billion private placement was almost 4 times oversubscribed, a strong signal of investor appetite. If the timeline holds, the listing would significantly deepen Nigeria's equity market. Still looking at Dangote Enterprises, Dangote Cement has posted a strong first half with profit after tax up nearly 23% to 638.5 billion naira. Group revenue crossed 2 trillion naira for the first time, up more than 21%, while gross profit climbed over 30% as cement and thicker exports rose over 60% on stronger shipments to Ghana, Cameroon, and Cote d'Ivoire. Nigeria remains the group's biggest earner, with domestic margins improving to 60%. A new plant in Itori is expected to be completed before year-end, adding further export capacity. Still with the markets, where S&P Global has agreed to acquire a majority stake in Agosto & Company, one of Africa's oldest domestic credit rating agencies. The deal gives the global ratings giant a controlling stake in the firm operating across Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and Rwanda, and is expected to close later this year. It comes amid growing criticism that international rating agencies misjudge African risk and follows President Tinubu's repeated calls for the continent to build its own credit rating capacity. Analysts say the move signals growing international confidence in Africa's debt markets, even as governments continue pushing for fairer assessments. We'll go on another break. When we return, news from the money markets. Welcome back. On the money markets, the central bank has trimmed the yield on its one-year Treasury bill even as investor demand surged. The 364-day bill was oversubscribed nearly 7 times over, drawing more than 3 trillion naira in bids against 500 billion naira on offer, while the stop rate eased to just over 17%. The strong appetite reflects abundant liquidity in the banking system and a gradual easing in government short-term borrowing costs. Analysts say the trend could ease pressure on private businesses, which has long been crowded out of the debt market by high government yields. Turning to the central bank's annual report, where the Nigerian's foreign exchange position also strengthened last year. Total inflows rose nearly 14% to almost $110 billion, driven largely by non-oil exports and private capital rather than the central bank itself. The naira fell to around 1,436 to the dollar by year-end, from over 1,500 a year earlier. The bank says the shift towards private inflows reflects growing confidence in its market reforms. However, not all of that report holds a positive story. Consumer credit outstanding fell for the first time in 6 years, dropping nearly 20% to 3.8 trillion naira as high interest rates squeezed personal borrowing. Retail loans now make up more than half of all consumer credit, a shift the bank links to its prolonged tight monetary policy. It's time now for a break. Still ahead, more business buzz. Welcome back. On the fiscal side, government's budget deficit widened sharply last year, according to a new report from the Budget Office. The shortfall jumped 47% to 13.5 trillion naira after oil earnings missed target by nearly 5 trillion naira, forcing Abuja to borrow 61% more than planned. The fall pushed total public debt to almost 145 trillion naira, breaching the government's own debt ceiling. Officials say ongoing tax reforms should gradually ease the reliance on borrowing. Now a note of both opportunity and warning to Africa from the head of the World Trade Organization. Speaking in Abuja, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said global trade hit a record $34.7 trillion last year, even as tariffs and to move quickly to capture new investment, warning that exporting war materials alone would repeat old mistakes. Africa, she said, cannot afford to wait. This may be a once-in-a-generation opportunity, one the continent cannot afford to miss. Turning now to global markets, Samsung Electronics has posted a record quarterly profit driven by booming demand for artificial intelligence chips. Prices climbed on demand from data centers and AI infrastructure. The gains came even as Samsung's mobile phone division swung to its first ever quarterly loss, squeezed by those same rising component costs. The company says it expects the memory market to stay undersupplied for the rest of the year as AI infrastructure spending continues to climb. Same with global businesses and in Southern Africa, where Japan is placing a strategic bet on critical minerals. Japan's state-backed metals agency, JOGMEC, is investing up to $34 million alongside Toyota Tsusho in a heavy rare earth project in Namibia, targeting minerals used in defense and electric vehicle motors. The move is part of Tokyo's push to reduce reliance on Chinese rare earth exports following Beijing's tightening controls over the past year. A final investment decision is expected within the next year in what could become Japan's first rare earth mine on the African continent. This is all for Business Buzz today. I am Louisa Asidi. Thank you for watching.